Okay, for step 4, guys, we're going to create background. For step 4, we're going to create background framework. What does that mean? Well, you want to choose something that's important to you and use an image or something that symbolizes that item and create a positive space that works as framework so that you can insert images later that represent other parts of you as a person, which you could see in your mind map. So I know that sounds a little confusing. Let me try to explain it the best that I can. Um, Before we get into that, I strongly suggest that you create a group with all of your face layers in it. So mine has a bunch of stuff in it, a few different copies of the face adjustment layers. If I click on the top layer, hold down Shift, and then click on my very bottom layer and then hit Control G, I will get it in a group, and I'm naming it face so I can hide it and show it very easily. I can also differentiate it from this background stuff that we're going to get into. So I'm going to go to the top slide in the presentation that I've given you guys today. And the first part says, look at your mind map and think, what is the most important node on here? So if I go to my mind map, I look around, and there's a lot of stuff on here. Many of you are probably going to think family is the most important, and that's great. Very important, obviously. If any of you decided that religion is very important or the most important thing, that's great too. There's really no wrong answer. It's totally up to you. I've chosen baseball, and there's a couple of reasons for that. So let me go back to the slideshow. Let's say I decided instead of baseball, I decided to choose family. Okay, and then so I look at slide 3 and I go, okay, after you've made your choice, now you must think, what imagery representing that node can I use to create some sort of framework in my background? And when I think of family, I have pictures in my head of my family. It's very hard to come up with anything symbolic that represents family, and I'm surely not going to use the word family, right? So what symbols represent family? Well, that's very, very hard to come up with unless you have a family crest or something that absolutely symbolizes your family. So I'm going to move on and I'm going to go, okay, family is really hard to create framework with. So what if I choose, as I said, baseball? A lot of images that represent baseball. The one that comes into my mind the most is seams. So what if so this is the frame, the slide that says, if you can't come up with anything, go back and choose a very important node that is easy to represent with imagery. Again, so I chose baseball because baseball was instrumental in forming me as a person throughout my life, and it's easy to represent with imagery. Okay, so what image do I want to pull from the library of baseball images that's out there to create framework? And the first thing that came to my mind was seams. Okay, the seams of baseball. So the next slide says the key to success is creating framework that uses your chosen item as positive space, but also leaving negative space in between. We talked about positive space and negative space when we discussed the elements of art. It's very simple. Positive space generally has something that is recognizable. Negative space is something that is sort of empty, blank, or is unrecognizable. So I want to use seams to create my framework. It's the negative space. This is a reminder. It's the negative space that you will use to fill with imagery that represents you. Okay, so here's what mine looks like, and I'll jump over to Photopea in a second to show you. So I brought in all these seams. I brought in different pictures of baseball. I did some little treatments on them to make the reds and the darks pretty much the same. I masked out a lot of the white, even though there is some part of the baseball left in there that I might have to mess with later. But the seams are the positive space. The white areas are negative space. So again, if I go over to Photopea and I turn on my seams, you can see what I have here. So I'm always looking at and thinking about what the end result is going to be. What are we going to do with this? What's going to happen? Remember, we're going to duplicate this and we're going to flip it horizontally. So I'm going to have a canvas that's twice as wide, and I'm going to have images in there, and these are going to sort of blend. I'm going to have another like rounded seam here, and another seam that goes up here because this is going to be flipped. All right, so I'm also thinking about, okay, how much empty space do I want? How many images do I want to represent me in my self-portrait? Now remember, the directions say you must use at least 5 images, and that doesn't include yourself, and that doesn't include the framework. So I'm looking at my negative space, and if I count it, I've got space up here, this white space up here, that's 1, white space over here 2, and here's 3. This space right here, which is actually going to be a whole space, is 4. This space is 5. This little triangular area over here is 6. This area down here is 7, and this area down here is 8. So the way I've constructed this, and again, it's all a bunch of different layers. Oops, that's my face layer. It's all a bunch of different layers in my seams group of seams that I've duplicated, rotated, moved into place, masked out so that they all sort of fit together a little bit. I believe I have multiplied each blend mode using a blend mode as well. See, I've got multiply on a lot of these. That gets rid of that white. If you look real closely into this thumbnail, you can see that it's seams with white, but if I multiply it, that white goes away really quickly. Obviously a mask on it as well. So that's how I have organized it. And this creates a framework that I will be able to use to insert other images into those negative white spaces during the next step. So that's your goal for today and tomorrow. Hopefully you can get that done. I'm here for, if you have any questions. Again, I think it's very essential that you understand where we're going with this in order to design going backwards from that end goal and thinking about how can I create this framework and this negative space to put images into later.